morning, students. Today we'll start with chapter 5, that is pollination and fertilization. This chapter is divided into two parts, that is pollination and its type. Another one is fertilization and the events that takes place in the fertilization. In this first part, we are going to deal with the pollination and its type. What is pollination? Pollination is a process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower or the flower which is in the same plant, or the different flower which belongs to the same plant. Here in this we will deal with how many types of pollination. Let us see. Pollination are mainly of two types. First one is natural pollination, another one is induced pollination. These two are not mentioned in your book, but according to the natural pollination are of two types, mainly self-pollination and cross-pollination. Now let us see what is self-pollination and what is cross-pollination. Self-pollination involves the transfer of the pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, which is also termed as autogamy, or of another flower of the same plant, which is also known as diatonogamy. Examples of self-pollination are pea plant, groundnut, barley, etc. Now let us see when can self-pollination occur in a plant. Self-pollination occurs by two main types. Either it is bisexual flower or it is a maturation of the sex organs at the same time, which is known as the homogamy. Bisexuality means the pollination can occur in the bisexual flower. Bisexual flower you have learnt in the chapter flower, that the flower which have both male and female organs is known as a bisexual flower. It can occur also in the unisexual flower, where both male and female flowers are born on the same plant. Another part is homogamy. Homogamy means it is referred to the maturation of the sex organs at the same time. Means the maturation of anther and stigma of a flower must be at the same time. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of self-pollination? Let us see. In advantage, the first point is the parental characters are preserved indefinitely. That means the parental characters are always preserved. Next is flowers need not to be large. The flowers are not needed to be large and showy to attract. It is self-pollinated, so the flowers can be small also. Next, fragrance and nectar production is not required, which saves considerable nutrient material for the plants. And also, self-pollination adds to great economy on the part of the plant. Now let us see what are the disadvantages of the self-pollination. Continued self-pollination may lead to weakening of the offspring. Sometimes the same parental characters grows to the offspring and it leads to the weakening of the offspring. Next, its seed that is produced will be poor in quality. Maybe if there is any kind of poor quality seeds which are produced by both the parents, so the offspring will get a poor seed quality. Next is defective character of the plant cannot be eliminated. Suppose any of the parents have the deformative character or any kind of defective character, it cannot be eliminated from the offspring in the plant. So these were mainly the advantages and disadvantages of the self-pollination. Now let us see another type of pollination, that is cross-pollination. It involves the transfer of the pollen grain from the anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower of different plant. It is also known as allogamy. In this, the pollination between the flowers of genetic constitution is known as xenogamy. So the examples of the cross-pollination are sunflower, date palm, maize, etc. The cross-pollination is favored by certain kinds of adaptation which are present in the plants or in the flowers, plants of the flowers. In the flower of a plant. The first one which is shown to you is declining. Declining means the plants bearing unisexual flowers possess only one kind of sex organs. Either it will be male or it will be female. Example, papaya, mulberry, etc. Next is dichogamy. Dichogamy, it refers to the maturation of the sex organ, that is the male and female organ, at different period of time. It is also of two conditions. One is protandrous, that means here the anthers mature before the stigma. That examples are Rubiaceae, Malvaceae and Labiatae. These are the names of the angiospermic families. Another condition is protogynous. Here the stigma matures before the anther of the plant, of the flower. Example, Magnolia, Michaelia, Adhatoda. These are the examples of protogynous. You can see in protogynous the stigma matures before the anther, while in protandrous the anthers mature before the stigma. Now let us see next one, that is heterogamy. You can see it in your book also. The phenomenon of bearing two types of morphological dissimilar flowers in one single plant. You can see here two different flowers are given. In one there is long style or pinned eye which bears a long style and short stamen, and second one short style or third-eyed, that is flowers bearing short style and long stamen. Heterogamy is a very important phenomenon which helps in cross-pollination. Next is hercogamy. In certain flowers, the morphological barriers develop which makes the self-pollination impossible. Certain kinds of morphological barriers, it can be anything, which makes the self-pollination impossible and allows only cross-pollination. For examples, Calotropis and Zeuxine. Another one which favors the cross-pollination is self-sterility. Flowers in which the pollens are incapable of causing fertilization. In some flowers, the pollen grains are unable to cause the fertilization, means they are not able to fertilize the female gamete. So that is known as the self-sterility. Example is maize. Now let us see what are the agents of cross-pollination. They are of two types. These things you have learnt in the lower classes also. The pollinating agents. The agents which helps in pollination are known as the pollinating agents. These are of two types. One is biotic agents, another one is abiotic. Biotic involves insects, snails, birds, etc. while the abiotic involves wind, water, etc. First we'll deal with biotic agents. Biotic agents, in that the first one comes is pollination through the insects, which is known as the entomophily. You can see there how the honeybee is pollinating the flower. Examples of such flowers are salvia, yucca and ficus. Next is ornithophily, which refers to the pollination which is brought about by the birds. Examples are Salmalia, etc. You can see how the bird is pollinating the flower. Next is pterophyly, which is brought about by the bats. Examples of such flowers are Adansonia, etc. One more content which is given in your book is Elephophily. This is a pollination which is facilitated by the elephants. It is found in those plants which are those flowers which are very large. For example, Rafflesia, which is one of the largest flower in the world. Now let us see about the abiotic agents. First one is anemophily. Anemophily is a pollination which is brought about by the winds. Examples of such flowers are wheat, maize, coconut, etc. Next is hydrophily, which is also known as water pollinated or hydrophilous flowers. These are found only in the aquatic plants. You can see here the example of Vallisneria in figure 5.3 in your book. You can see how the male flowers are floating on the top of the surface of the water, while the female flowers of the female plant, female flowers are on the reaching up to the surface of the water, and there the male flowers come and pollinate the flowers, female flowers. Now let us see what are the advantages of the cross-pollination. Offsprings are healthier compared to the self-pollinated flower. New varieties may be produced. New varieties of flowers we can see. It helps in increased seed production in the cereals. So it is a very useful method. So these are the advantages of the cross-pollination. Now we'll see what are the disadvantages of the cross-pollination. The pollination is not always certain, means it may occur, it may not occur. Next is a large number of pollen grains which are to be produced to ensure that there are very less chances actually of the pollination during the cross-pollination. Next is, if in a crossing a diseased plant get involved, then it will give a weak type of offspring. So these were the disadvantages of the cross-pollination. You can read it from your book also. So this was all about the pollination. There are certain differences given between wind-pollinated flowers and insect-pollinated flowers which you are going to learn. Also, the difference about self-pollination and cross-pollination is given in your book. Please go through it. It will be very useful to you. And also these terms which are mentioned, that is unisexuality, self-sterility, dichogamy, hercogamy and heterostyly. This all should be known to you very properly. Mark it in your book and it will be useful. So this was all about the pollination. In the next video, we'll deal with the fertilization.